this is the 18th of September meeting of the zoning bylaw committee.
I missed it, Clark. Where's Tom?
I don't know. He was on some plane this morning.
Yeah, he's traveling. I don't know to where, but he said he was on a plane this morning, so he's not going to make the meeting.
It's very specific that we must all join to have a quorum tonight.
Yes. So, all regular members, just say that you're present. Clark Brewer present.
Michael Dickey present.
Thank you. And
David Farag present.
thank you, David. So I'm just going to pull up the agenda. Of course, my agenda doesn't click on. Okay, good. Here it is. Okay, first item on the agenda is to finalize Article 5, review meetings with the ZBC and AEC, and then minutes.
Okay.
So, Judge Cutler, do you want to run through the revision in Article 5?
Sure.
And Deborah, Tanya, I'll assume you're here to talk about any changes to the anything that would be related to the AEC wind turbines, and solar panels.
Correct.
Okay. Do you mind sitting through our review of Article 5?
I mean, we could reverse it if you want. I mean, I've had a chance to look at the committee's comments, and I do have responses and suggestions in response if you want to do that, and that'll then put to bed or possibly put to bed Article 4. It's out of, it's done. It's, ready to go to the planning board, no issues, and then we can get to Article 5.
Well, that sounds good.
Okay.
That sounds great.
Okay.
Judge, I'll let you go through those changes.
Okay. So from what I could see, the principal concerns that were raised in regard to sorry, I just want to get that by the Alternative Energy Committee had to do with how we define and treat accessory small scale solar energy systems. So I don't know if everybody got the responses. Did Tom send those committee's responses to everyone? Well,
Sandra, did we get them?
I believe everybody was CC'd on the email reply.
So there was some concern that when we define accessory small scale solar energy system as primarily designed and intended to generate electricity to serve as a source of power, heat, and light for the principal use of the lot. There was a suggestion that we add in there primarily designed and intended to generate no more than 125% of total electricity load to serve as a source of power, heat, and light. That was one change. And then they also wanted to add in and is incidental and subordinate to the principal use of the lot. With the first suggestion, I'm perfectly fine with that if that's what the committee would like to do, if that's what the planning board would like to do at this point. We can make that adjustment. It makes a lot of sense because when I was defining it, I was trying to get at the balance between allowing people to have their accessory source of power, but not turning it into a money-making activity. This is not a business. So we all know that when there's excess energy generated, it goes back to the grid and people get credits and so forth. And that's fine, but I think by putting the 125% limit on it, I think that's pretty good way to put control on it. What we don't need is the additional language of adding and is incidental and subordinate to, because accessory an accessory use in and of itself, it is defined in the bylaw, is incidental and subordinate to the principal use. So when we say it's an accessory to any principal use, that's what, that's what we are in a sense. So it's just redundant language that is
Okay.
unnecessary. But I
That
would
makes sense.
definitely agree that we should have some limitation on the design, and how much power it's designed to generate.
And Judge Cutler, if it's at 125%, and someone had an unusual circumstance where they wanted to generate 200% of their load, would
Well,
that be
who's
a
gonna, I mean,
variance?
first of all, it's not gonna be it's gonna be designed at a certain level
Yeah.
to meet the qualifications for however those installations are set up. So as long as, it's designed in that fashion, and the building inspector will confirm that it's designed to generate an approximate load. I mean, again, everybody's load is different, so 125% of the load of an accessory solar installation for a commercial business is going to be far greater than the one that is for a single family house. So they're all gonna vary, and the amount of electricity that's actually used versus what's generated is going to vary.
Sure.
But I think if there's apparently there's from what the committee provided to me, there is an industry standard, and it's measured. I think you provided me with that. The rated nameplate capacity on the actual installation. We'll
Okay.
say what the capacity of the generation is, and then the building inspector will have to, sort of make a determination as to whether or not the installation qualifies for that. And if someone attempts to do a lot more, they're, not going to make it. Maybe they can squeak by with a little more, but it won't be
It would
massive.
it would be on the order of 10% more than what it's rated for, not 100%.
Yeah, I mean,
And
they can't,
and the
it can't.
limitation to the limitation to the use of the lot, is there a limitation to it being used only on the lot? Does that conflict with net metering or
No, it doesn't say it
any
can
of that?
only be used on the lot. It
Okay,
says 125% of of electricity required to heat the principal use, provide heat and source of light for the principal use. So that's what the measurement is going to be based upon. What is the principal use?
right.
Right.
And then let's say if you had an accessory dwelling unit, would that be included in the principal use in terms of?
No, that's an accessory use, so
Yeah,
that would be accessory to the accessory. I mean, I think that
I know, I'm just
probably
trying to go through
it gets I mean, it gets a little dicey, like, I mean, generally speaking, if you've got, let's say you have a solar panel in the yard and it's going to serve as electricity, and your accessory unit is hooked up to the electric system for the, the measurements for the meter for the entire house, well, then it's all treated together. But could you have an accessory solar panel to serve the accessory outbuilding that's used as an accessory dwelling? I'm not so sure that would fly, because then it's one on top of another. So I think you'd
Well,
have one system for the principal use.
I've just raised a couple of questions. I just was wondering how
Yeah.
absolute it is. Tanya, I don't know if you're comfortable with this language. If something were to be a slightly different circumstance on the ground, it doesn't seem like a variance would apply, because you're deciding how to generate on-site power. And there isn't what is typically termed a hardship that would trigger a variance or creating a new nonconformity.
Yeah, I mean, I think you raised the issue of the accessory house, right? We didn't think about that. I think what we were trying to protect against was the fact that at any point in time, the power is going to go into the grid and be paid for under net metering. The economic incentives do not encourage people to put a ton of solar panels on the roof because they don't get paid enough for the
It's
cost of the
wholesale instead
panels.
of retail, right?
Right, they only get the supply cost at the residential level, so it just doesn't make sense, given the cost of panels, especially with interest rates where they are. But I think we just wanted to make sure that it wasn't gonna be a physical limitation. That, given the fact that there's financial net metering, that was our objective. We looked at the Duxbury limit, they put it at 125% total electricity load or total electric load. I think the question that's going to be subject to interpretation is if somebody is building a house and they say it's going to have X thousand square feet, plus I'm going to put in a mammoth JAMA charger for my electric vehicle, and I'm going to have a battery, right?
Yeah.
That's total load in my mind, even if
Mhm.
it's phased in over time, right?
Right.
There's sort of a future perspective piece to it, and they wouldn't normally pay for the panels unless they're going to use the power.
So
it's sort of, I think we're
125%
captured.
threshold should be fine.
Yeah, it should be fun, and you're also limited, you know, in the side, how much panel, well, not for business necessarily as much as for a single family house, you're not gonna have, you know, that much space for panels. I mean, it's not like you can have a field of panels. Just,
Right,
But you
right.
can if you have a lot of land, right? That's what we're trying to make sure they're limited to, whatever the use is
Yeah.
on the lot.
Yeah.
But we want to make sure it's the total electric load versus just limited to the use of the lot.
right,
Right. So if you happen to have a site that has a lot of solar potential, it could potentially be an all-electric home, heated, hot water, and car power and backup, all electric.
right,
And in fact, that's the state is encouraging all-electric homes, especially and businesses for new construction,
right.
with the stretch code plus that's that's out there.
And again, nothing is perfect. We try it out. If we run into issues, and it shouldn't be 125%, it should be 110, or it should be 135, that
Okay.
can be adjusted.
All right, Your Honor, I think maybe it's time to move on unless the city.
Okay. There was a second suggestion or concern, and that was right now, it's as proposed, it says that roof mounted accessory solar energy panels are excluded from building height measurement, provided they're installed at an angle no greater than 10 degrees. I got
Right.
the 10 degrees only because I looked on solar installation, what is the optimal tilt, or if you will, of a solar panel on a roof, and they said it was about 10 degrees. So that's why I put that in there. I'm perfectly willing to accept whatever people who know more than that, you know,
Well,
advise. That's up to you as to
in New
what you want
England,
to
it's
do.
always been like a 12-12 pitch, 45 degrees has been optimal for
Yeah.
for
Yeah, and if
solar
if you
panels.
want to put that in, that's fine. What we don't need,
I don't.
I'm a little bit concerned because again, we're talking about roof mounted. The biggest concern was if it's a projection on the roof, it is not subject to the building height. It's accepted anyway. The reason I put this special exception in here was because it can't, to be accepted from the current projection above roof, it can't cover more than 50% of the roof. So I thought, well, if people wanted more panels than that, they're no longer going to be accepted from the height. And so that's why I wanted to make sure that we allowed more than 50% of the roof to be covered with panels if it made sense. So I'm thinking perhaps instead of giving an optimal angle, let them deal with whatever angle is appropriate.
Yeah.
But maybe talk about, provided it doesn't project more than 6 feet above the highest point of the roof.
Yeah, I think that would be fine. I mean, most solar panels are installed 6 inches off of the roof plane.
Yeah, yeah.
You
So
know, there might
depending
be
upon
some
that way, depending
circumstances.
upon how they're tilted to catch the sun, you know, they
Yep.
could be tilted up, and if it's a lower roof, they can be tilted quite far bit up because they won't ever meet the building height limit. So I
Yeah,
think
I think our concern was the flat roofs. So there are
yeah, but flat roofs
flat.
they can go up. Yeah, they can go up.
And so
So
making sure, but we also propose the, up to 6 feet, or the way Duxbury had it was if it's subject to public interest, because we didn't understand why we would eliminate the height limit. If somebody has a 35 or 30, I don't know what it is, foot high house, why do they get to go higher with their panels? If they have a flat roof and it hits the limit.
Well, then they're gonna go up six, they might go up 6 inches or something above the limit.
Well,
But
how, I mean, we just didn't understand why there was an exception to the limit, but we thought if there is an exception to the limit, let's cap it.
no,
So you don't
there is
get weird-
there's already an exception to the limit. So most panels that are on a pitched roof, for example, will go up a few inches or what have you. They can project above the highest point of the roof. So at the highest point of the roof, if it's 6 inches a little higher because of the panel location, that's okay under the current bylaw, provided the panels don't cover more than 50% of the roof area. So in order to avoid that limitation, I put in here that they would be exempt, provided they weren't, I didn't want to see, as you said, a flat roof, and then you have all these, panels up there, covering the flat roof that are tilted up 8 or 10 feet up in the air, or 12 feet up in the air, and you didn't want that. So I looked and I don't know, it said that they're normally set at a 10-degree angle. So that's why I stuck that in there. But we don't even have to put an angle if we just say, provided
Good.
that it doesn't project above the highest point of the roof by more than 6 feet.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I
and
think that sounds rational.
we want to accommodate flat roof construction and angled roof. In some
Mhm.
cases, you have a flat roof and you want to optimize the solar energy, you would want to
Right.
tip it up. On
Right.
the other hand, a lot of installers are now installing flat and taking the 10 or 15% loss. And just because it saves so much material and installation costs. But Tanya, Mike, you're the only one I know has solar panels on their own roof. What what do you think of this change? Do you think that makes sense?
Just speaking for myself, the panels are on the pitched roof, and there may be a couple of inches off of the roof, but they don't project above the roof line. And my
Right.
assumption would be you wouldn't want to install panels that did project above the roof line, because that would create windage,
Right.
Well,
Right.
unless it's a flat roof, because this has to cover both flat and pitched roofs. Although the
So
residential
Mike, can you see
example
them from the street? Can you see your panels from the
Yeah.
street?
Oh, yeah. They can't be they can't be covered, because if
Right.
they're covered, you wouldn't get any generation of energy. But
Yeah.
Well, provided that we get rid of the 10 degrees and go with solution, like you said, if there's 100 applications that say, hey, we need 7 feet of projection above existing roofs, which I doubt will happen. I think this is a reasonable approach.
So we won't put the 42-degree angle, but we will say, provided it does not project above the highest point of the roof by more than 6 feet.
Right?
Does that make sense? Okay, so that's a
Yeah.
recommendation that you'll make to the planning board at the public hearing?
Sure.
Should we be prepared with that? I won't change
Yeah.
it in the warrant article now because that's out there and it's, being looked at, but we've
Well, we
got
can
this as
change
a,
anything as a part of
Yeah,
the planning
exactly.
board's public hearing process.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so we'll take that as a
Any amendment.
That-
yes. Okay.
the
Okay,
the
there were two more.
the
Two
one
more.
drafting point I'd raise, and
Yeah.
maybe it's thinking too much, but in terms of the $1.25, do we need to have some kind of make it clear, it's an annual type of use? Because in the summertime, my usage is way more than in winter. And it's at least possible on a very sunny month in the summer, on a month-to-month basis, I could go over $1.25 in terms of what I need. In fact, I hope I do, because in the wintertime, I would be, down around 30 or something,
Isn't this though that nameplate rating?
Yes,
It's not actually the generation, but
that's
what
correct.
it's rated at.
Yeah, so maybe we should refer to that rating capacity
Mm.
in there. And okay, all right.
Well, except I think that's isn't that defined someplace?
No, we don't. So you have submitted a copy of what Duxbury does, and what they refer to, it's generated, so it's sized to the electricity generated by the facility as measured by the rated nameplate capacity
Mhm.
is no more than 25%. So we could use that kind of, and I guess a rated nameplate capacity must be a standard, well, I can look that up, but that's a standard. Tanya, is that a standard that is employed in the solar energy business?
Yeah, yeah, and I think we need to be careful we're doing apples to apples. So the 125% of total electrical load, what Mike's
Mhm.
saying is there's a time frame for that measurement of the load, which is in
Mhm.
megawatt hours. But if we do it tied to the capacity rating of the solar panels, it would then be X% above, like 125% above the peak demand for that
Oh,
house.
and that's a lot. Yeah, I see what you're saying.
And
Yeah,
that's a lot.
yeah,
So we just have to be
yeah.
careful. I
Okay,
think for Mike's comment, which is a great comment, Mike, it's no more than 125% of total annual electric load.
Yeah, yeah.
okay.
Or
Total
of
annual electric load.
anticipated
Okay,
annual electric load, because,
okay.
I think
And again,
anticipated is important.
I'm pretty unsophisticated. I just know that, in the summertime, I probably produce more than 125% of what I use. But in
Right,
the wintertime, it's so I'm just want to make sure that, we're average, everybody's clear. We're talking about, over a period of time,
right,
presumably on an annual basis.
right. Okay, that makes sense. That makes a lot of sense. Okay,
And
I'll
load
work on that
varies,
language.
and it varies, right? So I think maybe expected, anticipated, I don't know, I don't
Yeah,
to, but it's going to differ from year to year, and you don't want somebody to take the lowest amount you ever
right,
used
right.
and say
Okay,
you're
all right.
exceeding.
All right, I will do a little more research on that to see if we can tie that down a little more so I can have something for the planning board next week.
That
Okay.
sounds great.
So there were two other comments, or one other really. So we require that ground-mounted accessory solar energy installations are subject to the setback and ground coverage regulations of the underlying district. And the Alternative Energy Committee was fine with that, but they're concerned that the existing setbacks may still cast shadows on neighbors' yards, especially in winter, and they would like us to add a requirement that they may not cast shadows outside of the lot in which the ground-mounted system is installed. I'm going to recommend against that at this point, only because that's a different set of regulations protecting the solar access of abutting properties is a different animal than what we're doing here. Here, we're providing an opportunity for people to use alternative energy systems. What happens to the neighbors is, I think, step 2, that hopefully will be the next iteration of solar energy regulation in the town. And that is, and towns are beginning to have this, is a no shadow requirement. And that would be for all structures, not just a ground mounted solar facility, but any structure, that there's limitations on what shadows you can cast on the abutting properties. So, but that's like a much more detailed, complex set of regulations that I'm going to suggest we put on the back burner for this time around. And that's something that definitely will have to be considered as you're moving into looking at alternative energy and climate resilience and all of that. And that's something that is not impossible, and I think a lot of towns are doing it. But it just has to be done carefully, because you know, you have all kinds of competing interests, those people who want trees up and those people who want them down. And, you know, you start getting into a lot of issues. And so there needs to be a little bit of study and public participation around that one, I think. So I'm going to
So are you
recommend against
suggesting
that
this would
change for
go-
now.
Sorry, that this would go into 19 or 20?
I don't know. I think I see it as a separate regulation, in terms of, um, and I don't know if it would go back into Article 5 as, you know, as another regulation. And I'm not exactly sure how far, you know, how it would cover things, because you've got buildings that are within 15 feet of a property line, and depending upon the orientation, they may well cast shadows. And then you've got, again, as I say, people who have large trees on their property line that cast shadows. So how you treat that is a, you know, is a delicate balance, and I think it's one that requires study. But I wouldn't say it's part of the solar energy
Accessories.
installation
structure, yeah.
protections that we're trying to provide here.
There's some vague comments in in the zoning bylaw about solar access, and I've always thought that subdivision should be laid out with solar access in
And
mind.
you have that power.
And there should be a density bonus for 80% or more of orientation of structures being optimal.
Yeah.
And because let's face it, the solar potential of any house or building is cast in stone when the first pieces of the pie are created.
Right,
And
right.
and then people put garages on the south side, which I have a big problem with. But
Yeah.
you know that it is a complex issue, and we only hint at it as even an issue in other areas of the zoning bylaw.
Yeah. I mean, it's again, I think it's a much broader issue than just whatever shadow that a ground mounted solar energy facility might cast. And certainly 12 feet is actually lower. Most of the accessory structures can be up as high as 25 feet. So, you know, this
Right.
in the scheme of things won't create it. I just think this is not needed at this time, given everything else that's going on, and I
Too
think it may
complicated.
complicate it. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
So, okay, so that's that. So I don't know if Tanya, you all had other concerns or whatever on this.
No, this is,
Okay.
this was a summary. Obviously, we're not talking about a lot of sentences that you're proposing to add.
Right, right.
And so we just wanted to share the concerns that the committee expressed to Tom, try to put it in an easily
It was
digested
very
format.
nicely done. Thank you. I appreciated it. It was very easy to follow.
Good. And we aren't lawyers and we're not judges.
No,
So
no, but you,
obviously it was suggestion from our part about our concerns. And we also
Yeah.
wanted to shed some facts and
Yeah.
provide an example from Duxbury on
Right.
what they had done.
Exactly.
So look, at the end of the day, are you keeping the height limit? Are you okay with going 6 feet higher? And that's a decision for this committee, not ours. We just wanted to highlight that the flat
Right.
roofs were being unfairly discriminated against.
Sure.
Okay.
But, in some of our forums, we did talk about providing other types of zoning relief for solar panels. But I think that it's unfortunately this isn't the right time for that, front setback or other height. I mean, the higher you go, the less likely you're going to be affected by trees and your neighbors, but then the higher you go, you're more likely to cast a shadow on your neighbor's property.
Right.
So it's something that we have to make sure that we're focused on the public good and all the pros and cons that
Right.
can
And the other thing is to take
get
into
involved.
account that over time, technology changes.
Right.
And you may not be having these solar panels, maybe something entirely different. And and that's the thing. There's no way to make it perfect. You will always have to be on the lookout for what needs to be changed, and you have to do it in a timely fashion, so you keep up with it. And what we're doing here is just providing the basic foundation. And right now, the bylaw says nothing about accessory solar, so we wanted to make sure we got it in there at least. And you know, there may be a different way to attack solar altogether in 5 years. We won't know that. It's kind of like, you know, all those towers that people were fighting about, and suddenly, you know, they're not a big deal anymore. And whether it's a wind tower or a solar panel, whatever, things change, and so you have to be adaptable.
Right. And right now there's two types of solar technology, right? There's the photovoltaics and then
Mhm.
there's the sort of the, I mean, it
Thermal.
just looks
Thermal.
crazy. The mirrors that shine and heat up
Yeah.
water and, you know, I think that's prohibited in the bylaws because of the, there's some language related to the light or something like that.
Yeah,
So I
it
think
casts
that
glare, yeah.
second type, the glare is
Mm.
prohibits.
Yeah.
Nobody's going to put a whole bunch of mirrors or panels,
Right.
you know, mirrors focused up on a panel, whatever. So I think it really is, we are talking about photovoltaics. That is generally what's being used,
Right.
but you're right. We have to be technology neutral. And if there's something else, Windows, right? I guess that's a question. If Windows can produce solar energy and there's some
Mhm.
technology out there that does allow for that. I'm not sure this gets captured because they're not solar panels.
Yeah, they're
But they
also
would be
windows.
they would be accessory parts of the building, so it
Yep.
wouldn't be an issue.
Or
They're not
accessory
separate
parts to
structures.
to the window.
Yeah,
But
they're not a separate structure, so that wouldn't be a problem. Yeah.
Yep.
All right. Well, thank you very much. That's
Thank
very
you.
helpful.
We appreciate the opportunity
Okay.
to comment.
Thanks-
So I don't know if
thanks,
anybody had an
thanks, everyone.
opportunity to take a look at the draft article for the Article 4 use regulations in total, with all the definitions included and everything else, and whether you saw anything that struck you as wrong or difficult, or that something was missing. But I think we covered everything we've talked about to date.
I'm sorry, Article 5?
This was the Article 4 that we sent you the final version of Article 4 last week.
Thank you. Let me find it.
This is, it says draft warrant article use regulations updated through September 11th, 2023, and it's in the form of a warrant article. So it has the Article 4 text and table, and then it's followed by the additional changes that we're proposing to Article 15, to Article 2, and so forth. So if there's anything in there between now and the public hearing, it'd be great if you give me a heads up or give Cassandra a heads up. Okay.
Sounds good.
Okay. So now we've got Article 5, and I still haven't been able to figure out how to get my table in there. I may have to have my assistant retype the table and get it in there all right, but for now, we're going to work with what we've got. So we didn't make a lot of changes after we met last time. I think the first real change was in the table, and we wanted to put a footnote next to accessory under maximum height. So that footnote now says, except where the zoning bylaw otherwise expressly limits the height of certain accessory structures, such as, but not limited to, signs, fences, solar energy installations, or communication structures.
I'm sorry, and that's in the table under
That's
exception.
now going to be a note
Okay.
on the table of dimensional regulations, and it'll be under the heading of maximum height, and there's principal and accessory under that. And so we've got footnote 1 next to the accessory.
Hmm.
And I'm going to have to also figure out, because this is on 2 sections, there's the residential section and there's the non-residential section. I have to have the same footnote go into the non-residential continued on the second page. I'll have the same footnote put in there. Okay.
Okay,
So
got it.
that was the only change we made to the table. And then when we went to section 5.4, the supplemental regulations, I added in an introductory sentence there that says the following regulations supplement the basic dimensional requirements set forth in the 300.5.3 table of dimensional regulations, just to clarify what that section was about. And also E in that 5.4, we were talking about that triangle, that clear vision safety triangle. So I wanted you to take a look at the new language that I did that's there in yellow. So it's then no higher than 3 feet above the grade of the center line to the abutting streets at any point within the clear vision safety triangle formed by a straight line across the lot, which connects the two street lines at points measured 25 feet from the point of intersection of said street lines.
Now,
Is that
were
something
there-
you can draw, Clark?
yeah, I was gonna say, wasn't
Yeah.
somebody gonna draw a little representative diagram?
A diagram, yes. I think I offered to draw the diagram.
Yes.
I thought
Maybe-
you already did, Clark. Didn't you already do
Maybe
that?
it would be important to do it as at least as a part of the public hearing.
Yes, I think so. But is that pretty much what you wanted to? We took away the corner clearance concept.
Yeah,
And I didn't give it a big name that we would define. I just called it the clear vision safety triangle and then
Good.
described how that was formed. Okay. And I put a reference to that in D just before it, where I say it's subject to the clear vision requirements for corner lots set forth in 305.4E. The following structures may be located within these yards. So just to emphasize that.
And,
Okay,
and
the other-
all of these, I'm sorry, Your Honor, all of these take the place of the 18 items that are as a part of the dimensional regulations now. So it puts them back into the
into
main.
the main regulations rather than having notes following the table. Yeah.
All right, so that's good. Then we don't have to, and with the table in the actual section, then you don't have to scroll to another thing or find another
Right,
thing online.
exactly. It just is right there. You
one-
can just
one
go
place.
back and
Good.
forth. Right.
Good, yeah.
Okay. J was the other thing that we didn't really get to talk about. This is an existing regulation that I tried to sort of rewrite a little bit, but there's I think I wrote it was an exception, but I think it's more of an alternative to the minimum front setback requirements specified in the table. So
Yeah.
as an alternative, the building may be set back at a distance that's measured in relation to the buildings on either side, right? Is that what you're
Yeah,
intending?
Yeah,
Okay, all right.
I've seen this in use, but generally it sort of applies to like a subdivision where you have house,
Yeah.
house,
Yeah.
for the 200 feet. And in some circumstances, especially with all the private ways,
Mhm.
I could see it having, not that wide applicability, maybe
Mhm.
a wider than 200-foot applicability. I mean, if you really think about it,
Well, that's where you have
in residence-
variances. If you need
residence-
variances, you got
Yeah.
variances. But if you want to have a flexible setback situation, that's beyond the scope of just updating and
yeah.
and
Okay.
fixing the bylaw.
Well, I mean, would it be too much to say, let's just increase it a little bit from 200 feet?
Well, that's a substantial change.
Is it?
Yeah, that's a
I mean,
substantive change.
for residents B, well,
You're
for
not in residence B. This only applies. Well, yeah, it applies in any
residents-
district except HB and LI. You're right.
but for residents, I'm just talking about,
Mhm.
you can stop me anytime. But for residents A, B, and C, the lots have to be 100 and 125 and 150 feet in width anyway. So
Right.
really, this would only apply for, a house or or maybe a house and a quarter on either side. In
Well,
terms
no,
of
it's,
the
you're
average.
measuring from the, not from the lot, you're measuring from the principal building from
Yep.
the lot line.
Yes.
So if there's a principal building that's set back 25 or 35 feet from the lot line, that's within 200 feet.
Yeah, but it would really only be like the house next to yours, really. I mean,
That's
it
all they're measuring. They're looking at a house on either side of you. If
Yeah,
they
really,
have,
that's
if
it.
they have, a different setback,
Well, I know it's yeah, of course. I understand. It's just that for a neighborhood, if you want your house to be set back so that it
I
seems
don't
to
think this
fit.
was for new. I don't know if this was for a brand new subdivision,
Well,
Clark. This sounds to me like it was more of
did-
an infill situation.
It
Where you
does
had
look like,
existing houses that had
yeah,
closer setbacks. They were
yes, it
closer
does.
to the street. And
It
so you
does.
said, well, if you want an average of those, you can do that. You wouldn't average
Yes,
something that
it
was
would.
further back.
It wouldn't be a part of a new subdivision. It would only
No,
be infill. But in
right.
terms of the applicability, it's really just the house on either side.
Yes,
That the average of the house on either side.
right.
In some cases, like my neighborhood, the closest house is 400 feet away.
Then
So
it
it's
shouldn't
not even
matter.
close.
It
What's that?
shouldn't matter. It said is if it's that far away, if there's
Yeah,
nothing within 200 feet, it's
right.
treated as if it meets the current setbacks.
Well, I mean, the thing that's great about this option is it allows things to have a sense of fit. Like
Yes,
you don't have two houses that are 15 feet from the property line, but oh, by the way, you're in residence B, you've got to be 30 feet back.
right. You're
And then
right.
that would look weird. You get to like
Yes.
line things up.
Yeah,
And I
yeah.
get that. I just think it's a great concept to create flexibility in your neighborhood or
Mhm.
within some distance of what's planned.
Yeah.
That this doesn't really do much for. I mean, it's not widely applicable.
No, it's not. This was a note that was already in there, so I left
Yeah.
it in.
Yep.
So yeah, it may
And I
not
don't
be a
I don't
may
I
not
don't
be a
think we
big
want to
deal
take
at
it.
all.
I don't think we want to take it out. I think the
No.
language that you've got is fine. I'm wondering, is there any way to make it more
Oh, broader applicability?
Yeah.
Well, you might think about that for your cluster development in terms of what your setbacks are and how you want to either stagger them or make them similar. I mean, that's one thing you could do.
Or increase the distance.
Hmm.
Because like I said, I've seen this tried before, but invariably there really isn't much of an average on
Yeah.
just your next door neighbors.
Right, but this is also to allow you to have a lesser setback than
Yeah.
you normally would. It's because you've got existing houses that are already there.
I
If
understood.
you've got a subdivision, you're starting from scratch.
I understand that.
So
Yeah.
your average is going to be the average of this. There
Well,
is
if it's
nothing
all
there, so you
new-
got to use the
If it's
average of
all
the
new, it's
setback.
going to comply.
Yeah, right.
I think we, unless there's any disagreement regarding J, I think we've
We
pretty
beat
much,
it.
enough.
yeah, exhausted the discussion regarding it.
Okay, all right.
I think I made my point of
Okay,
hoping that there
Yes.
could be some
Yes.
flexibility in the future.
right. So I didn't make any significant changes to Article 5 other than that, So unless you had concerns on how those regulations are now in place or the table itself, are you okay with the way the table is set up? We had so many footnotes. I tried to condense as many as I could and not make them too repetitive. I don't know if I condensed it too much for your use, so you ought to be letting me be aware of that.
Well, there's nothing missing.
Yeah,
It's all there.
I think you've done the best job you could regarding the footnotes because
yeah.
we got to a point where the exceptions were eating the rule.
We're outweighing.
And yeah, so that at least it's a little bit more manageable than it was before. So that's about as best as we can do, I think, with it. Any table's going to have some footnotes, but it's just how many and the breadth of them are you going to have? So.
Yeah. Okay, so then in addition to that, we have the related Article 5 amendments. And Cassandra, did you get my late email by any chance today about 5 o'clock?
Yes, I did see it just as I was
Okay.
coming into the meeting.
That
So I
might be the
do
better
have that one.
document to show the red line changes.
I'm just going, I'm sorry, I'm stuck on
Yeah.
one thing with the 5.3 table of dimensional regulation. Under a couple of the exceptions,
Yep,
4, 7, and 8, we have
Yep.
the 15-foot height for structures that are a little bit closer. Now, we were gonna change accessory structure height to be 25 feet. And in the past, that 15-foot height has been to the midpoint of rafter, let's say,
well, the height is the height now, so it's gonna be the height of the building, not midpoint.
I know. In the past, the
Right.
15-foot was used to midpoint, and now it would have to be used to the high point, I guess. Unless it's a flat roof. And
Right.
I'm wondering, does this encourage flat roofs instead of pitch roofs for things like porches, which I believe it's intended? These exceptions are intended for things like porches that get a little bit closer to the property line.
I
And
don't know.
we
I think
do
that's a discussion we had
Yeah.
last time. I don't think we can be changing
Well,
again,
we've
making
changed
substantive
accessory.
changes.
We've changed accessory structure height, and I'm wondering if we shouldn't change this height to something like 20 feet or
Well, no, you're saying
25-foot maximum.
so maximum height of an accessory building, let's say, is 25 feet. If it happens that that accessory building is less than 15 feet in height, it's only 12 and a half or 14 feet in height, they can be closer to the setback line than your everyday structure. So
Sure,
that's the exception,
but
right?
there's the portion of a main building less than 15 feet in height. I think that in our current
Yeah,
table.
so if you have a wing on the building, like a little, as you say, a porch, a covered porch or something like that, and it's less than 15 feet in height, that portion can be set back 15 feet from the side yard instead of what,
Instead of like
25,
20 for a
instead of,
residence A. Yeah,
instead of 20, yeah,
or what is
yeah.
it? Is that right? Side is 15
Yeah,
and
instead of
15.
20, side setback and rear setbacks are reduced somewhat.
Okay,
So
so
I don't think
even
it changes anything. Your building height is measured the way we changed it. It's to the roof top. And will it make people have shallower roofs? I mean, in my experience, if you've got an attached porch or something, it's not all that rare to have a very steep pitch roof on it. Doesn't make any sense. You're not going to have an attic over it, so they
okay,
usually
well,
are a little bit
Well,
shallower.
we knew we were changing when we changed the height definition. We knew it was affecting this and accessory structures. We've dealt with the accessory structure, but we haven't. We're. It sounds like you're making the case that 15 feet should be fine for porches. Don't worry about it, Clark. And we're
Well,
running.
if they want to go higher, they just have to meet the required setback. I
Understood.
mean, it's
But
this,
this exception
it's the
is for.
setback exception you're talking about changing, not the height.
Yeah, I was talking about changing this number of 15 feet to
And
something.
I'm saying to
because
you, that's something for the public hearing. I don't think this committee can make
okay.
that change. That's a substantive change.
All right.
And I'm not sure if it's even within the scope of the advertised changes, because again, we weren't making massive changes to
Well,
the
we're changing
numbers.
accessory structure height,
No,
so I don't see
that
any
was
reason why
in,
it
but
couldn't
that
be
was in
brought
the
up as a part of the public hearing.
that was in the advertised change. The 25 feet was in the advertised change,
Okay,
not a change
we'll
to
just put this
this.
off till the public
Put it
hearing,
on for the public
unless
hearing. I think it's
anyone
something.
else has any thoughts on the matter. I don't want to be the only guy dragging this meeting out.
No, it's important to raise it. But what I'm saying, so I'm trying to, I'm sorry, I'm trying to
Herding cats.
not
Yeah.
cut you off, but I'm trying to explain, and I've had to this is a difficult issue here because I know a number of people have come out with comments on why did you allow this? Why didn't you change that? Why I don't like this number. Well, that wasn't the scope of this project. This project was to try and bring the sort of chaos into some kind of an organizational system and readability so that at least we know what we have and what's required. If we want to change what's required, that's another planning project. That's and the analyzing, well, what does this change do? And
Okay,
is it
I'm
something we
fine.
want throughout the town or
Again,
not?
I brought up the accessory structure, but I'm
Yeah.
gonna drop it. We'll just move on.
Okay, all right, okay. But I mean, bring it up at the public hearing. I'm just saying, I don't
I will.
think we can change it now. Okay. All right, so then, Cassandra, if you have the other changes that I'm recommending to, yeah. Okay. Oh, came out in black. That's funny.
Looks good. Classic.
White on black looks good too. Yeah.
My dark mode so that it doesn't hurt
Okay.
my eyes as much.
Okay, so the part one was the deleting Article 5 in its entirety, including the table of area regulations in the appendix and replacing them with the new thing, which I haven't put in here yet. Part B was adding the only new term that we're going to be defining in Article 2 is street line. That's the sideline of the street right of way on which a lot bounds. So that, I think we discussed that last time. And then this is probably a better redlined version of the changes to the existing definitions. The floor area net is, I think, somewhat reduced, but not necessarily. And there is some reference to basements and cellars and attic spaces with ceiling heights of less than 7 feet. Do you want that? That is as proposed, but that's a question for consideration. Are those counted? Or these are excluded from the net floor area.
Right. Yeah, I mean, that's the way we've had it. I don't think we have a distinction between basements and cellars. I know we've talked about this in the past.
Yeah, yeah.
But I don't think we necessarily need to worry about that right now.
Right. Okay.
Yeah,
Any
because
other
if you're getting less than that, you're getting generally lower than what is a allowed livable area.
Yeah,
So
it's not
that's
habitable space. And
yeah,
you're
so
measuring,
that's why it's been excluded. So
right, right. I mean, some places they exclude hallways and elevators, shafts, and all kinds of things.
yeah.
But this does exclude any floor space intended and designed for parking of motor vehicles in order to meet the minimum parking requirements of the zoning bylaw. And that means, if 2 spaces are required, that's what's excluded. If they put in 4 spaces, not all 4 spaces are going to be excluded.
Well,
And
I'm sorry, in our case, we whatever we have for these calculations have to work for residential and commercial properties.
yes,
Like
yeah. So if
commercial
if a
properties
property is required to have 25 spaces and they put them in the building, that's they're meeting their minimum requirements. And so
Yeah.
that space is not included as part of the net floor area.
Right.
Right. But if they put in 40 spaces and they only require 25, that additional area for the 15 spaces is included. So if there's a maximum, they're going to have to adjust. Yeah.
The
Okay.
only point I was going to make is that, like, for commercial buildings, there's a whole different set of like real estate calculations
Mhm.
that are
You mean that leasable space and
they're BOMA, yeah, leasable area,
Yeah.
rentable area to exclude stairs and elevator shafts and other
Right.
kinds of elements, structural components. But that's not what we have here. We have something that has to work for any type of building.
Right.
So we don't go to an industry standard for that.
Right. Right. Okay. So floor area ratio, you presently, call it as the ratio of, it's the ratio, the sum of the net floor area of all buildings, and it's really not. It's the sum of the,
Gross.
well, it's
We don't
just,
We
yeah,
don't use FBR for anything other than in the village.
right. So I think it's just the sum of the floor areas of all buildings on a lot to the lot area. That's the ratio.
So you're just proposing to get rid of gross and then use net
Yeah, I mean,
and simplify that.
yeah, simplify it. We
And-
could, no, I could get rid of gross. We could use net. It's just either use net or just, but if you say the ratio of the gross floor area, but then you're excluding basement cellars, then you're really getting at the net. So
Right.
maybe we should just use the word net and just say this ratio of the sum of the net floor area.
Yeah, it might. I mean, usually it's about 20%. Sometimes
taken
10.
from the tax assessor's database.
Cassie, can you?
I can get this for you, Judge Cutler. I did
Yeah.
the analysis, so
Okay.
it's a definition, Clark, on our tax assessors. It's a certain square footage that they calculate, so I can get it for you guys as it's defined by the tax assessor's database.
With the net or the
For
gross?
all those definitions there, they came from the tax assessor's database, and there's a
You're breaking up, Cassie.
specific column that I feel like it should be defined here as, because it's calculated.
Cassie, we can't hear you. You're breaking up. Do you have a mic? Can you get closer to your mic?
Can you guys hear me now?
Yeah.
Yes.
Oh, I was saying, so I did this analysis and I can get you the exact definition from the tax assessor's database, because it comes from their database is how we
Your current
calculated it.
your current definition.
The new definition of how, yeah, it's coming from an analysis that we did a few years ago that comes from square footages and calculations from the tax assessor's database.
Right. But
So I
this
think I'd be
change-
nervous. I think I'd be nervous to define it in a certain area, I mean, a certain specific way when it
No,
comes
this
specifically
is
from
already defined in the bylaw.
I know, but we're changing it, right? So we should probably
We're
change it
changing,
based on
the
how.
reason I'm changing it is the way you've got it now is it's the gross floor area minus, and then you say all the things that are taken out in order to get a net floor area. So I just switched it and said it's the
Well, I
ratio
think
of the
that's
sum of the
because
net
of
floor
how-
area.
I think it's because of how it came from the tax
Right,
database. I think,
but that doesn't mean that's the way you want, that language is very convoluted. It makes no sense because you've defined net floor area as the gross minus all these things. And now you're saying it's the gross floor area minus all these things. Why not just call it the net floor area, which you've defined?
because net floor might not be per the tax database. So if you go and say, I want my FAR and whatever we say, it is whatever 1.3,
Yeah.
it's coming from a defined term per I think it would make more sense if I just sent you the analysis so you could see it.
Okay, all right.
You know?
Because it doesn't make sense.
I think what
to
you're
say
saying makes
gross
sense, but
minus.
then if our calculations, I don't know, it might just be, Clark, it's a good question for of
Yeah.
how we present it to the planning board. Like if you would use something like one of our calculations to show how you would get it. I just wouldn't want there to be confusion on how we did the analysis to,
Well, I
you
think an example would be great, and
Yeah.
dovetailing with what the assessor does, that could be useful.
Yeah.
I think the judge's point that, it's got to be clear, even if it conflicts with what the assessor does. It's got to be clear in the zoning bylaw.
But Cassie, you're saying you want to be able to ask the question of the assessor's office to get certain information, and if you're using
unless we're
different
completely
terms,
making up the new way of calculating it in the bylaw,
not.
then
It's
then
not.
yeah, right. Okay.
yeah.
That's all
You're
I'm saying, is that
calculating it the exact
we
same way.
used defined terms and we said, okay, what does gross mean here? What does
Right.
net mean here? And she gave it to us specific. So I just didn't want there to be a disconnect.
Okay, all right, okay, good.
Yeah,
Okay.
send that out, Cassie.
Yeah.
Okay.
That sounds great.
Okay. And then the definition of residential gross floor area, as I mentioned, has been defined a little bit differently. I wanted to take into account that when you're talking about the residential gross floor area, for purposes of requiring the large house review, you're taking into account accessory buildings as well. So I wanted to make sure this was the finished areas of all above grade floors or portions of above grade floors in a single family detached dwelling and its accessory buildings as measured from the interior faces of the interior walls, excluding finished ceiling areas with ceiling heights less than 7 feet. And I think we talked about that last time, where it could be a finished closet that has less than a 7-foot height, or finished crawl space area inside. It's finished, but it's not really usable as considered usable as habitable space. But if you want to not exclude those, we should do that. Currently, you exclude unfinished areas of attached or detached garages, and it just didn't make sense. You're only, because people do finish their garages, so
Sure. Yeah.
it's part of the gross floor area of the whole place. And so I think you should be more, cover more opportunities here to actually measure what you're trying to control. And somebody could have a massive outsized 8-foot 8-car or 12-car stall garage and say, well, that's not included because it's unfinished and it's used for parking my pet cars. Well, that defeats the whole purpose of the large house review. So
If we do that, though, we probably want to increase the size of the large house review. And I people have submitted large house reviews that included a pool house on site and
yeah,
garages, and in the past we've excluded those from the total.
why would you though?
Yeah, because they're not used year round or
Well,
heated.
you're
I
trying
don't
to get
know.
at the massiveness of the construction,
Yeah.
and you want to look at the totality of it.
Sure. Well, I mean, again, in the past, we've said we're excluding garages, and that's why we're using 3,500 square feet. If we include as a threshold, if we
Right.
included garages, then maybe we need to up it to 4,000 square feet or something like that.
Yeah,
I don't know what the number is. I'm just saying.
yeah. Okay. Well, all right. That's something to consider as you're,
I'll make a note of that.
yeah.
But Tom wants to get rid of the large house review altogether.
Anyway, so
Maybe
so
my
we may not
variance
have,
now
it
is
may be
just
a
wasting
non-issue.
everyone's time again.
Right.
Well, like I said, I think you have to look to the reason it was first put in that it makes sure that the project complies with zoning. Because there were projects that didn't comply with zoning, and there was also other bylaws that weren't on the books as well. So again, people wake up in the morning, they're busting rock next door. They say, what's going on? They find out they pulled a building permit to build a 5,000 square foot house next to them. So, I mean, the large home zone review was done to make sure that it complied with zoning, to give a pause for that purpose. So that's, I know you've seen enough of them, Clark and Tobbs, but
Oh, sure, lots.
yeah. But I mean, that's the whole reason. So you can feel perfunctory as you're going through the process, but it's to make a pause to just make sure it complies with zoning, and so that nobody's doing anything outside of it and say, whoops, I built this over here, I built that over there, and what are you going to do about it then? So I mean, in the Concom, we just used to make them rip it right out. I mean, that's what we didn't have a problem. A foundation in the 50-foot, see you later. You got in the wrong place. But when it comes to the planning and zoning, I don't know if that's been happening. So.
We
No
talked about
comment.
Yeah. I think the definition of frontage and lot and corner lot, they're really just wordsmithing. It's really not changing what you've got there. Same with front lot line. Lot line rear, I tried to simplify it a little bit more than it had been. We talked about removing the aspect of touching a front corner, which we didn't know what it meant. So now what we're really talking about is the line most nearly opposite to and most distance from the front lot line. And in the case of a triangular or other irregular shaped lot, or where the most distant lot line is at an angle of greater than 45 degrees to a straight line connecting the extreme ends of the front lot line to the rear lot line, then the designated rear lot line shall be a 10-foot long line drawn within the lot parallel to the straight line connecting the extreme ends of the front lot line. It's like, it's very convoluted. And I sort of understand it. Again, needs clearly needs some kind of a diagram, whether we keep the language as it is now or we change it.
Right.
Right.
I don't know where this particular language came from, and in some
Yeah.
cases it could have been on the floor 1986, where somebody
Right.
had
Right.
some example in it, and it was late at night, and everybody said, "Well, let's just do whoever he says,
Yeah. Yeah.
so we can get out of here."
Right. Because
It
the first sentence really is what a rear lot line is, and this is making the exception for some strange shaped lot.
I'm gonna call my civil engineer friends and
Mhm.
throw this at them and ask them if we could reasonably just use the first sentence,
Yeah. Yeah.
omit the rest, because I
Right.
just it it's kind of strange, and it seems
Mhm.
very particular. In your experience, Your Honor, have you seen other bylaws with this in regards to a
Um,
rear lot line?
yeah, they usually have some provision for how to measure on an irregular lot. I don't know if they've ever seen this kind of language.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's just it's the lot that the building inspector says is the rear lot.
if we're gonna keep it, and I think Clark shouldn't be burdened with all this, and maybe we can ask Tom and Cassandra if there is any money to be used to get some diagrams regarding a few of the definitions, because you certainly see that in other bylaws in other towns, that regarding the measurements and things like that, they'll have a that they'll have a diagram right below it. And with this one, I mean, to me, this one is as clear as mud. So I think
Yeah, yeah.
I think the diagram is what's going to hold. I mean,
Mhm.
if well, I mean, you're a judge, Judge Cutler. If you saw this, I mean, what would you say for what this means to how you're going to
Well, I
measure the?
mean, the bigger problem is what is an irregular shaped lot?
Yeah, yeah.
You know, yes, this does assume that most lots are, standard four sides and equal, more or less equal corners. But that's why I added the most nearly opposite. Right now, it says it's the lot line opposite to and opposite and most distant from the front lot line. So I put most nearly opposite to,
Mm.
which I think covers a more irregular shape. I'm trying to think if you had a triangular lot. I mean, some places will say, if you have two sidelines and no rear line, you treat both the sidelines as rear lines. I mean, different towns do different things about that.
Mm.
So that may require a lot more discussion at the public hearing. I don't know. But I tried to leave it as close to as possible as to what it is now.
Well, thanks for taking out touches the front corner at least.
Okay, all right. All right, so then lot width was just again a little more wordsmith. And front yard setback, really, I just took out a lot of language that I don't think really was necessary. It's the open space extending the full width of the lot between the side lot lines from the front lot line to the nearest wall of a principal building. And all of this of no point shall be closer to, I mean, that's all regulatory language that's governed by your setbacks. It's not. The rear setback didn't really change much on that one. Really required yard. I just really tried to simplify the language that was already there, but didn't change it substantively.
Right.
And I wanted to note that, and I think I mentioned this last time, we had stuck in the provision of temporary structures, which was kind of sort of sitting alone, and we put it into, it was in originally in Article 4. So we're taking that out and we're putting it into Article 5 now. So we didn't include it in the new Article 4, but it was sitting in the old Article 4.
But temporary structures is 5.6 now.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Now, here's a question that I have for you all in terms of what the town is used to. On the redlining of the changes to the definitions, do you also print the new version without the redlining to show what it's going to look like after you've made all the changes? Or do you just do the redline version?
Well, typically for the warrant article changes, you have the edited, all the edits noted. But
Mhm.
in this case, I mean, in some of the revisions, it's almost impossible to capture that. It's almost like replace section 5.3
Right.
with the new section 5.3.
Mm.
So if there's something that's operative, critical, important, I think, more focus and comparison is probably useful. For example, like the height definition. But where it's wordsmithing and improvements, I'm not sure, and it's sort of buried in the overall reorganization. I think it's a judgment call
But what
on,
is most useful at town meeting for people to have on the floor of town meeting or in the warrant? Should they see both the red line version and the final edited version side by side? Or
well,
just the red line version and then the motion will just have the final edited version?
well, where you're wordsmithing, you can have the edits shown.
Okay. And that's
I
useful
mean,
to
it
people.
typically it says where it currently says this, replace this with that.
Right.
And then there's a description of it. It's just that where you're sort of moving things around and doing a reorganization, it's very difficult to capture all those edits in less than 1,000 pages, right?
Oh, no, I didn't mean for the whole of Article 5. I was talking
Okay,
about the
good.
definitions in terms of
Yeah.
how
Well,
people, because I think it's difficult sometimes to read these red line things and really have it flow as to what it all says.
if
And
it's
I'm
if
just
it's
wondering whether it makes sense to have both versions, both the redlined version and the completed version without showing the old language that was crossed out and the new that's added, but just the
well,
new
I think
total.
typically we've had the old language that what was changed.
Right.
Um,
Okay.
but as a part of the introduction, if we just focus on it being wordsmithing,
Mm-hmm.
then I don't see it as being something that is going to jump out at people on the floor of town meeting and be worth
Okay.
discussing.
Okay. All right. All right. So unless I hear otherwise, I will proceed to try and get Article 5, the draft Article 5 done up. and in final format. So it can be printed out and sent to the planning board and put up on the website or whatever. And
Great.
then I guess we've got a meeting with the ZBA on Tuesday. Is that
On the 26th.
26th? Okay.
We-
And
We did have a
again,
meeting the other night with the ZBA and went through what Woody's comments were.
were you able to satisfy him at all, or is he still has
Well,
concerns?
I mean, I think what we initially what we did was we showed him where the like home occupation
Mhm.
exception existed now, because I don't
Right.
think when he first looked at it, he kind of reacted and didn't find it
Yeah.
and said, what the hell?
Mhm.
We had this thing, now you're getting rid of
Right,
it, but it
right.
just lives in a different place. And Tom
Right.
explained that. And, I'll say, I called up Tom afterwards and I said, Tom, you didn't use your pissed off face, and that was good. For the discussion, I think it was useful. I mean, I think Woody's institutional knowledge is useful.
Yeah.
It's just that Woody had a whole lot of characterizations as a part of his comments that
Right.
kind of distracted from I think the message.
Mhm.
And I'd hate to throw the baby out with the bathwater.
Mm.
But at least several other members of the ZBA thought that what was in place is good work, that if we need to, we can tweak later, but we don't want to, for example, put the accessory dwelling unit changes on hold now,
Right, right.
where
Yeah.
you go ahead, Dave.
Yeah, in talking with the ZBA, one of the things that I think we tried to get across is that if there were any specific questions as to something, was that they could ask you specifically, especially with some of the legalities, with definitions when we're brushing them up vis-a-vis the case law, vis-a-vis everything else. So that they should read it, because a lot of them had just gotten it, so they didn't have
Right.
time to digest Article 4 and the other ones, so that they could read it, digest it, then whatever questions of why the changes happened, they could be brought to you as well, and they could ask questions. And so I think that will be very helpful, because it's hard, frankly, it's hard to remember when you had so many meetings, when you go back to say,
Yeah.
this section of Article 4, why do we do
Right.
that? Well, that meeting was 2 months ago,
Right,
so
right.
so to get to the nuts and
Right,
bolts of it.
right.
So I think it'll be helpful, because, as we tried to say, at the end of the day, this is for the zoning board, is the one stuck executing and administrating this.
Right.
And so we want them to be happy with it, but it also has to, comply with everything that we had in our charge and for
Yeah,
you as well. So we realize that.
I'm
but
going for
yeah.
my own benefit, I think, in preparation for that meeting. And I know the board was I think the ZBA was going to discuss the dimensional stuff at this next meeting, if I'm correct. But I was going to just, for my own benefit, kind of annotate the changes in the Article 4 to say where these came from, because nothing was made out of whole cloth. Most of it was the original stuff, just rewritten and reorganized. So there weren't
Well,
so
the one that does kind of stand alone is the accessory dwelling unit one.
Yeah.
I think where we made some
Yes, that
changes
was
to that
big.
and
Yes.
loosened it up a little, then
Yeah.
that is a little bit more of a policy discussion of
Right.
how far do you want to go? Do you want to make it
Exactly.
as of right, or do you want to leave some controls in there?
Right,
And
right.
so I think that one, that one, like I said, between the planning board, the zoning board, the selectmen, that
Mhm.
might be a little bit more of a policy one, but
Right.
the
Yeah,
rest
and-
are pretty straightforward.
Woody had done a session at one of our forums on the accessory dwelling unit.
Yeah.
So he's and in our meeting the other night cited the MAPC regulations. But I think Tom was pretty clear that we have loosened it. But like getting rid of the 10 units a year, maybe we would change that, but probably not. Just because there are still people concerned that, you know, that they don't want to see an explosion. Well,
Mhm.
we'll make the changes and see what happens. We only had one in 20 years.
Yeah.
And we would expect more.
Right.
But
Right.
you know, not one in every other
But
house.
those little I mean, I personally want to see the accessory dwelling unit provision work. I mean, the town
Yeah.
wanted to work when they originally put it in.
Right.
But I think with you know, there is some of the small changes, you know, they mean a lot. Being able to, you know, change the facade of the house, which was you know, controlled before, allowing it to go be sold with the land and not, you know, dying
Yep.
with the sale. I think those are some pretty big changes, and then you can get into the other ones. But
And then the
hopefully,
accessory, the only other one
yeah,
was having an accessory
Building. Right.
building.
building.
Yes, yes, yeah,
That-
yeah. No, yeah, not doing
That's
it within the four corners of the house. Yeah,
those
so
three would probably open up a lot of possibilities.
yeah,
Mhm.
yeah.
But
I think
it's still a pain of a bylaw. Still,
yeah. But I mean, you know, it's going to come down to the architects and the engineers on whatever the lot, because I mean, you're doing it for, you know, a whole area. You can't go and study it vis-a-vis what everybody's house and lot is configured. So you know, you're going to have sort of a blanket rule, but that's why you have to have some controls in it. I don't think just a straight as of right would be, you know, do well in the best interest of the town. But I do think opening up and see
Nope.
where it goes.
Yeah.
Go from there.
yeah. And you know, I mean, if we get 10 in the first month,
Well, that's your
then
limit, right?
that's our limit.
Yeah.
Then
And then you
we talk
decide, do we want
talk
more?
about that. Yeah, we talk
Yeah.
about that. I mean, I brought up in the past LA County. Apparently, ADUs is the largest
Yeah.
number of permits in LA County are ADU because they changed the zoning bylaw.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Exactly.
And they have a subsidy. The city has a subsidy for people who aren't wealthy. You know, everybody else, whoever those people are. There's a couple of other areas. I think New York and Vermont also are providing grants and subsidies for ADUs because they see that as the one place that people can expand for affordable housing.
Right.
I know this was on the ADU thing, but one of the
Yeah.
issues in getting any zoning regulation passed at town meeting is the quote unquote fear of the unknown.
Right.
And so if you have a zoning article that does allow something as of right or whatever, you know, you are going to be succumb to the argument, well, we're going to have this everywhere on every street corner, things like that.
Mhm.
Part of the reason I think in the original one, when the controls were in there, was that you know, it kept it at an incremental level, so that not only you wouldn't have it, but you also, that argument couldn't be made on town meeting floor that you're just going to have these in every, you know, it's going to pop up like mushrooms everywhere. But I do like the ADUs, and I think it's something that needs to be expanded and work from, you know, the promise that was made 20 years ago, but we'll see how it
I
goes.
mean, well said. I mean, I think 20 years ago, the bylaw was made dysfunctional on purpose, whether most people realize it or not.
Yeah.
And here we are, somewhere in between and as of right and the way it started. I think it's a good place.
I don't think you need a crystal ball to see that we might be seeing a lot more of them with with the world we're living in. And of course, we live where we are now. We're not 10 years behind or forward. That we're going to see a lot of people looking inward of what they can do with their properties. And the listings on the market show it. I mean, there's only a smattering of housing classified for sale, when in the summertime there used to be over 100, 120. And, you know, there might have been between 10 and 20 in the summer, you know, for a whole host of reasons. So I think you see a lot of people maybe look to this as an option as well. So we shall find out. But it was a good discussion with the zoning board. And I'm glad you're going to be able to come there and help iron out a few of the corners there, and we'll see how it goes. But it's like I said, they're the ones who are going to be stuck with it. And
Right.
part of the other thing by cleaning this up is we want to make it so that they're not there at a 3-hour meeting arguing about some obscure definition and how, you know, one side could say one thing, another side could say another, that it's going to be, you know, it's going to be as clear as possible. And so that they won't have some of those litigation and fights that we have. You can't stop all litigation because it's going to happen. But they've had that in the past. So I think this would be
The other
helpful.
And Cassie, I don't know if the building inspector has weighed in at all on any concerns he has with what's, no.
No, I've sent him the materials and he
Yeah,
hasn't weighed
yeah.
in.
Okay,
If I get a chance, I'll bug him because we, just to go through things, even anecdotally, probably makes sense for him to have a perspective on each of these.
yeah. It was useful to have him at the planning board public hearing last year, I think.
Yeah, I agree. Kind of cuts through the ice.
And he's the one that has to deal with it first, first line of defense, if you will. And so it's important that he's okay with it.
Yep, the plans get shown to the building inspector
Right.
first, and that's
Right.
first base. So,
Right.
yeah, if he can triage some things or help a homeowner or engineer or architect along, that would be helpful as well.
Yeah, Cassandra, check in with John. I'll do the same, and we definitely, I think, probably want him for the public hearing as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would
Live.
imagine that would be very helpful. I could definitely, give him the more updated materials that you've just gone over, and see if he has any feedback on it.
And he may have some suggestions on, clarifying some of those windy
Absolutely,
definitions.
absolutely. Yeah, or yeah, things that he gets caught up with all the time
Yeah.
that seem to keep coming back, but that's great. Well, I think
Yeah,
that's pretty much the
asked that.
agenda. Yeah.
I asked that of the ZBA if there were things in the zoning bylaws in these sections that they come up with over and over and over, and they're just a pain.
Yeah.
Then let us know
Yeah.
if we can make those changes.
Mm.
But it is almost 8 o'clock. I think, David, you
Okay.
were hinting at adjourning.
Well,
I think you
I
just
think
have
that
to approve minutes. And
yes,
then
yes, we do. We
you're
have
good to go.
All right.
thanks for reminding us.
I'm gonna back out then, and I'll say good night to you, and thank you
Will do.
again.
Thank you, Your
Thank
Honor.
you. Thank you, Your Honor.
Bye.
All right.
Thanks.
Yes, thank you so much, Cassandra, because I know we were going to forget that.
Minutes.
We had the
Minutes.
minutes from 9/11. And we could, and does anybody have any comments or changes to them?
No,
Well,
I can go ahead and make a motion
yeah,
to
please do. Yeah.
approve those minutes.
Second.
Then all in favor, Clark Brewer, aye. Whoever's next alphabetically.
Michael Dickey, aye.
David Frog, aye.
And Cassie, are you saying aye? Well, we have almost a majority. Cassie, they won't pass unless you vote.
I lost
Cassie,
her.
Cassie, are you there? Oh boy.
I think she stepped away.
I thought I heard her say aye.
I thought I heard her say aye
Background.
too.
Okay.
Yeah.
Or at least two of us heard that.
Yeah.
Are there any other meeting minutes?
No,
I think it was just September 11th.
yeah, September
great.
11th, because we did
Good.
the what was it, the 6th or something on the 11th, I believe we did.
Yeah, there was a slew of them.
Yeah,
Okay, then a motion to adjourn,
seconded.
and then we can't adjourn without Cassie.
She's right there.
No,
She's
I'm
on.
here, guys.
Oh, Cassie's
Sorry.
back.
Yes.
Good. We have a motion to adjourn in a second. All in favor, Clark Brewer, aye.
Aye.
Michael Dickey, aye.
David Frog, aye.
Okay, thanks, guys. We'll see you next time.
Thank
All
you
right,
so
great,
much.
Thanks.
Thanks, guys.
Bye.